Greetings, I'm Marten Rabarts, Director of New Zealand International Film Festival, Whānau Mārama. And right now we have with us a large number of the team of Rangi. This is a fantastic project which I saw at a work in progress stage and fell in love with it completely and decided on the spot that New Zealand International Film Festival needed to program its first web series ever. So I'm incredibly proud that what you've just seen is indeed the first the inaugural screening of a web series on our platform. So please meet some of the Rangi team. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, starting with Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Gainsborough. I'm the producer for Rangi. And this is...
I'm Cole. I'm the writer, and he, him, they, them pronouns.
Great.
My name's Elz Carrad, and I play the lead, Kaz Davis.
My name's Max Currie. I'm the director of Rangi.
Fantastic to have you all here. This is one of the more complex projects that I've watched coming along, you know, for the last months. You have had a lot of moving parts. But let's go back to the beginning, because I always need to know. It's just I think it's me personally, but I also know audiences kind of like to know, where did this all come from? Where did the idea come from? Who gave birth to it? Was it a collective delivery? Cole, maybe, as a writer, was that?
Well, actually, Craig was the first person to.
Yeah, I can start that off. I mean, the actual original concept started in a writer's workshop at NZME, and from there it was taken on by Oliver Page, who's also a writer credited on the series, and Oliver did a great job in starting the formation of the series, and as we went, we realized that, you know, it needed that authenticity and that trans voice coming through across the writing and across every phase. So at that point, Cole, who was a friend of mine, came on board, and Cole's also a writer with Shortland Street and credible artist in his own right. So we brought Cole on board, and Cole worked with Oliver and to develop that script and to really bring that trans voice to the page.
There's more than just the trans presence in the film is the series is everywhere. When did that all start to become part of the project, that it needed to come from within the community? Where did that kick in? Was it?
So it was right at the start. I mean, the minute you've got a project like this coming through, you know, it's completely inauthentic to not come from that. I mean, how often does a community get the opportunity to tell their own story? So when we had NZ On Air come on board and saying that they were keen to invest development funding into the story, immediately there was this recognition that, well, this is an opportunity for the community. This is huge. So the involvement with the community, the intention was there from the very start, which began then with bringing Cole on board. And then when Cole got brought on board, we started talking about more ways we could develop it with the community. And that just grew and grew and grew with the inclusion of consultation panels, which could veto the production at 5 different stages. With the inclusion, with the certainty that every trans role was played by a trans actor. And Cole also insisted on ensuring that we had an internship program, a paid internship program for trans people, so that we could train a future generation of trans artists.
It's fantastic. I love the idea that it is a collective piece, which is an increasing way of making works, I think, around the world. Rotterdam Film Festival this year had an entire section called Collective for works that have been created collectively, and I think this would in many ways qualify. But what were you given as building blocks when you were brought on board, Cole? What was there, and what have you added, and also how much came perhaps from other members of the collective that ended up in the story?
There was a solid kind of starting point storyline, and then it was kind of a point of developing through kind of I had this thing of like the things that I don't like seeing in trans narratives, and the things that me and my friends, my community want to see more of in trans narratives, or the things that I know will have a positive effect on the community. And then it was kind of like a lot of sort of problem solving and a lot of creativity in finding as many ways to bring those in and shape what was there to fit that better. And then, we had the consultation panel, and that was made up of 5 kind of big names within the trans community who were all also had a sort of secondary part as well. Like we had one a Māori consultant and a disability consultant and a particularly storylining consultant, like within the trans panel. But there was also a lot of unofficial consultation that happened as well through just conversations with me and friends, or things that I saw online, things that were happening in the community at the time. It was quite.
That's a really. The fact that you created a veto panel is like a really unusual aspect of developing anything. You've worked for Shortland Street. I'm sure there was no veto panel. Which is unique and wonderful. It's also like kind of scary because you invest so much in working towards goals in terms of drafts of things or storylines, and then they can just be shot down. That was, or would it also was Max's hiring? Could they veto Max? It's like.
One of the ways that I think about the panel, right, is that with traditional series, you have the network, which acts as sort of, the power center of decision making over stories and characters. And in a lot of ways, we created our own network to be beholden to, but that was from the community.
I see that. I see the parallel. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it was also, I felt like it was good support for me as well, because it meant that I wasn't often what happens is there might be a trans voice that's involved in a series or a project, but they're the only trans voice. And I know, having been that person in many times, the huge amount of responsibility that you feel to kind of be watching all the goals at the same time. And so it was a great support for me to go, yes, I might think that this is good, or I might think this is bad and have changed it or whatever like that, but to go, and now is that, does that stand for...
To arrive at some consensus and present the ideas that are in the storytelling as a group. It's like, we believe this is how the direction we should go.
And yes, it was scary to have this veto power, but it also was quite exciting, I don't know, at least from my point of view, because it was the sense of like, do you think it's good? Like, what do you think is good? And to then get, yes, this is good, we're like, yay, we know. Right. And we're all learning, about things that might come back from that and go, okay, cool, this is why we need to change it.
One of the big building blocks, you talked about building blocks, one of the big building blocks, for the creation of this idea came when we cast Elz Carrad.
Yeah.
Right.
In order to, the casting brief, we deliberately kept quite wide because we just weren't sure of the kind of talent that was out there for the major role. And one of the many things that Elz brought to it was the fact that you and Kaz are Māori, and that wasn't actually written into the character. We didn't want to be too specific at the start, and that in itself, in a story in a world that was already exploring identity, just broadened that theme even more and made it even more Kiwi. And it certainly required some rewriting of characters in a way that I think was really positive for the series.
And I think, just on that note, like if we actually had our full team here, there'd be a few more chairs on the stage. but Tweety Waititi was a major influence there, coming in and working with us to really develop the Māori storylines and ensure that there was really accurate and good, authentic representation there. And Tweety did an incredible job actually creating the entire backstory of the town of Rurangi and of the people of Rurangi, which comes across strongly in another character's journey, Anahira.
Absolutely, yeah. When did you find Elz? How did they cast you?
Well, my agent just sent through the brief, and I mean, I haven't been in the game for very long, and so when it came through, I was like, this is pretty cool.
This is good.
This is good. And yeah, it was just an instant sort of like relatable script, and yeah, that's how it happened really. Just doing my shopping at Pack and Save, and it came through.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I knew.
Sweet.
I thought I knew all the like talented trans actors around, at least kind of in the community, and that was, I guess, why I hadn't come across Elz, is because Elz hasn't been particularly attached to the activist community, so that's been
it's been a big thing for me. Like, I've never been a part of a community. I mean, I hadn't even met another transgender person before the show. So
how's that been? I'd love to hear about that journey.
A
little bit.
It's been really different. I mean, it's a totally different world from my world. I mean, I grew up in a small community, and I think maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
I think there's a lot of Rurangi is recognisable for all of us who come from small country towns in New Zealand. You shot in Ngatia, which is on the way to where I'm from, Coromandel town. So there was a lot of recognition there for me as well. It's like, I think, you created a kind of generic New Zealand small town really beautifully. Loads of layers, loads of complexity. I like some of the side characters very much that just sort of give texture to the world that your main characters are living in. It's really, really well created.
That was kind of one of the decisions that sort of started at the title point when we were naming it, is that we didn't want to call it, like some trans pun, but to make it, Kaz's story, that it was actually the story of Rurangi. And so that meant that there had to be that layers to it, that it had to be a sense of our town and a place, and not just of this one person's journey.
And this kind of bite-sized 5-episode story, was for us the most powerful way into the world of Rurangi. But by centering it on the town, we have much bigger plans, for the characters.
I hope so. I'm dying to see more. I want to go back to Rurangi fast.
So and in terms of what Rurangi represents for New Zealand, it's this fantastic crucible for a lot of the sort of tensions, that are going on in our country, and a great way to explore them.
I mean, I love those second story layers, the thing about the environment and the activism against that in the community, and a couple of those side characters that I really like are the farming couple next door who are sort of checking out what's going on, and they're kind of skeptical, and then they're like, maybe. Those are such recognizable characters, and it's like people who run businesses on the land are actually really sharp, and they pick up on stuff, and they move with the times if it makes sense for them. So those were really truthful moments for me that are the backdrop to Kaz's story.
And those farmers are part of this crucial debate at the moment, and I think a lot of the time, from the city gaze, we fail to understand that they're kind of at the forefront of grappling with some of these really big kind of decisions about the environment and sustainability, and it was great to bring some of that through to it as well.
And that's that questioning of like the way that they are farming is very real. We were actually on one of the days we were just using a paddock of a farm next to the road as a base, and the farmer came out and she spoke to us about the fact that they were dairy farmers and that they were industrial dairy farmers, but for the last 5 years she'd been looking into other ways of farming, and they were really considering moving towards regenerative agriculture. So I mean, it's very real out there. And we work closely with Gavin, who runs a regenerative farm in Te Araha, and it's such a difference walking onto his farm compared to walking onto another farm. Where every aspect of the farm just works with the other. It's quite beautiful. Yeah.
It was a really nice moment of when the cast and crew were in Gavin's citrus grove, which was it's part of the ecology of the farm, and for once we'd kind of had a little break, and we're all just sort of like standing around us eating these delicious like mandarins and oranges, and I remember that as being a really like just this little moment of calm in this otherwise hectic shoot where we were literally kind of taking some of the philosophy of rangi into our bodies.
Well, that citrus features in the shots of the deck.
Totally.
That's right, the bag of orange citrus.
I know.
They
Look
kind
at
of sharp. I'm like, where do they come from?
They're very symbolic.
It's been a lot of discussions over that bag of citrus.
I'll leave them there. They're great. Elz, when you got the role, you said you come from a small town. Did you needed to figure out your activist side for the role? Someone who would be plastering posters down K Road, on a Friday night.
And I had one of the other actors actually show me how to put the poster up. Like, it can't be that hard, but there's a trick to this. You got to do it like this, and I'm like, okay, But I think. Well, I guess. Well, I haven't played any other characters, but I guess with every character comes challenges, and for me, that was the challenge. Sort of, what is it like to be an activist? It's just I have no idea. So that's I mean, I've had conversations with Cole, and that was really helpful as well. And it's still a world that I'm still trying to figure out and understand. And it's good for me because it helps me to open my mind up as well, even as a transgender person. I mean, it doesn't matter whether I'm trans or not. That's not my world, but it's a world, and it's
And it's a world you've been, through the storytelling, you've been given access to.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's like in any piece of drama or film or web series or television that's really, really good. It opens a window for us as an audience, but also the people who are making that. They get to enter a world or be something that they wouldn't otherwise, and that's kind of the point of this all. So you got like thrown into a world. So you finding your inner activist is, it's probably not going to go away. You can't unlearn something.
Yeah.
Whereas Elz brought a lot to me in the script about the small town stuff, is because I'm not from a small town. I'm very much a city person and very much in this activist world. And you're saying that you'd never met a transgender person before, whereas I'm like, I could go 2 weeks and they'd be like the only people that I've talked to are trans. Not currently, but like there have been times where that's been the case. So it's been very much like a mutual learning space, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
And at the heart of it is just a simple father-son story, which is so universal and so compelling and so touching. That universality was that, I guess that would have been structurally planned in to give anyone access to this story. Casting your father, was a really fantastic actor there. Was that a long search as well, or did you kind of have ideas of who this beautiful Māori man needed to be in order to?
Yeah. So again, I mean, I cast the best actors for the role. That made sense. And I think, again, that Kaz's father was not initially written as Māori. Is that right, Cole?
There was no initial,
Okay.
Yeah.
But when Kaz's character went in that direction, then that was naturally part of it.
It was an option because we knew that Kaz's mother, having passed away, could brought the Māori side to the family, and really it was just watching Elz and Kirk Torrance go for it in front of the camera, and there was kind of in those early auditions, there was this friction. That just was really interesting, and certainly what just drew me to the story in the first place was this father-son dynamic. I'm really interested in that in my work, and I realized that with this story, although Gerald had raised Kaz, he'd never truly seen him, and Rurangi gave us the opportunity to take the audience to this moment, it's a big part of what makes the story work is Kirk's beautiful performance there, and some of the exercises we were doing was actually to sort of build in that father-son friction that you kind of see simmering under there, and. We were just so lucky that Kirk kind of walked into the audition. Yeah.
No, that's the relationship is really intense. As a director, working in this much more collective than usual way we talked about, did you have to adjust how you worked? Your working practice?
God, yeah, yeah. And I think the most I think the most honest thing to say about this way of working is that it's
frustrated to begin with.
Super annoying. And I think if it's not annoying for the director, which is so often the center of power, then it's not working. Because the way that we went about creating Rurangi in front of and behind the camera was all about sharing power, and so that's incredibly frustrating for me on one level, but it's a really beneficial frustration because it's way more collaborative. You're really having to listen to people's lived experience as opposed to what most productions allow the director to do, which is just ride roughshod over everybody and get their way. This idea of the auteur director. And so, although it was personally really difficult for me, the proof's in the pudding, and I can see in so many ways in the end result, like with the way that we did the TERFs poster, which drove me batshit crazy. This basic idea, of film, is a visual medium. So when we have stories about things, yes, sometimes it's about not showing things, but this big opening sequence that is really about what's on the wall. And my first instinct coming from the outside of this community is let's show it, with this bloody awful message that's up there. And the big discussion with Cole was hello, we see these awful messages all the time. How do we put our trans audience first? How do we let them know that we've got you? This is from your perspective. And so we had to figure out a way to do this without ever showing it. And it also involved Craig, spending hours and hours late to the night doing special effects and then
sending them to me and then me being no, because it's just up there more. And
So that's just one example.
That's a really, really good example,
Yeah.
actually. I think Craig and I had spoken about it somewhere along the way, because about the clarity of what's happening in your opening sequences. It was just, as a work in progress, we were having a little chat about on the phone. And I love the discourse that went into that, that protected the community from something that you just don't need to be adding, creating another platform for putting up on your screens, which you have ownership of.
Yeah, exactly. It was I'm not going to give any screen time to the same horrible stuff that we see every day. And that's, again, so often something that you see in trans content is because it hasn't been developed collaboratively and fully
enough in that way.
There may be one person in there or a couple of people in there, but again, they haven't been empowered to actually stand up to people who might be considerably higher up in the hierarchy to them, to go, no, that's actually really painful, or that's really upsetting. And so it was a case of that we did empower all the different people. So that the actors, an important thing that we talked about was about how do you feel about the costumes that you're wearing? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel respected? Do you feel okay in your body in these things? And to be able to say, if that was not the case, to be able to say about whether it was okay to touch your body, about this consent thing, about that. And all the interns in their departments, the art department intern being able to say, actually, no, that wouldn't be up on a trans person's wall. or these posters should be on the thing when they're walking around in the...
And I was going to say, what this actually makes you realise, looking back, is kind of how savage, a production is to the people who make it. And it's been really interesting.
It can be a battlefield.
Yeah, and it's been interesting for me seeing, like, post-COVID. I don't know if you've seen them too, Marten. I think was it this big letter or this big discussion out of Hollywood, about the way that people are treated on sets.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been tracking all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
What that was in my mind as you were speaking. It seems like you've sort of embraced a new code of practice, or you've built a new code of practice from the ground up. In taking all of these ways of working and creating a really successful product as well, and yet still have created it from within that framework. I think it's potentially a great model to be shared and understood. I mean, it's great that you're sharing it here today, but also, in the future, I think there's a lot of, we're all on a journey, particularly with different communities who have not been heard in the past, or not been respected in terms of production or storytelling or the way a story is told. All of those things you just talked about. So what you've learned, I think, will also be something that can be picked up and shared and transferred onwards to others. We do have to wind up.
I just want to add to that. I mean, that is something we absolutely are keen to do. So, we've been developing some resources on the website for that, and we do want to share that. And it's been incredible seeing other productions around New Zealand also starting to adopt a lot of similar methodologies. So Cole was actually also a co-producer, and on set here, after having done the writing, his role on set was actually of kindness officer, to be there as a person that anybody on the crew or cast could go and speak to, who had power right at the top level in the producing team to kind of make change. Wow. And so that was quite important. And I've just worked on another production recently who had a similar role, which they called the kaitiaki. So yeah, it's great to see that starting to happen, but it'd be nice to see more kindness officers on set.
Absolutely.
It was important that, what was interesting is that, what's necessary to be able to, for accessibility, for gender accessibility, what made trans people safe on set and to be able to work to their full potential, all those kind of things actually benefit everyone. Because it wasn't actually the trans people who kind of used me as a resource the most. It was all the cis people. And so, it's like, actually, it's not just that we're treating marginalized groups, in film, like, in a way that doesn't allow them to bring them for their full selves or bring their full potential. Actually, we're doing that to everyone.
Everyone needs a kindness officer.
Everyone needs, to be supported, to be able to talk about things in their life and go, actually, I'm having a really hard time at the moment, and what can we work out to make that easier?
Actually, just as we wind up, I was thinking it would be really lovely to capture this conversation we've just had and send it to the makers of Disclosure, which was on Netflix recently, because so much of the past pain that those amazing characters were sharing in that Netflix documentary, I think it would give them comfort to know that here in New Zealand, you've all been working in a way that they would recognise as something that they'd be comfortable with and safe. Look, congratulations on Rangi. It's amazing. I know there's more to come. I can't wait to hear how how everything is received as it travels offshore. Good luck with this variation, and looking forward to more. Thank you.
Thanks, Marten.
Thanks, Marten.
Thanks so much.